Hope everyone is having a good afternoon or morning, depending where you're at. We are going to get started in just a moment. I'll just give a brief intro here and a few kind of admin bits to say, and then I'll hand over to Jessica. So first of all, welcome. My name is Taylor Brownlow. I'm Chief of Staff at Count. Count is a Canvas-based BI tool. Really, our mission is to make sure data teams are more than support functions. So that kind of has two ways that we think about that. One is, we're getting some hellos. Feel free to say hello in the chat and maybe say where you're calling in from is always fun as well. We've kind of got two halves of that. So we obviously try to find data teams like Jessica's that are doing things a bit differently and share their stories. So we have a lot of blogs and things about data leaders, kind of how they're doing things differently. And secondly, is we have a Canvas-based BI tool, like I mentioned. So it's kind of like if you imagine, Tableau, Jupyter Notebook, and Miro had a baby put together. That's all about kind of how to help data teams work collaboratively, have more flexibility to tell business stories, that kind of thing. So that's a bit about us and why we're putting talks like this on. Hopefully we have many more coming up like this. Basically I'm going to talk as little as possible here today. A few things to note as you go. Any questions that you have, please drop them in the chat and there'll be time at the end for questions. Everything will be recorded, so if you've got to jump off early, you get disconnected, don't worry, you'll get a replay of everything. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jessica Franks, who has got a great talk for us ready to go. And I'm going to disappear for now. So I will see you guys at the end for Q&A. Jessica, over to you.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I hear we've got people from all around the world, which is terrifying, but also really exciting. So today I'm going to be talking about my journey towards creating a data strategy at Not on the High Street. Cool. So just a little bit about me. I'm Jessica. I'm the engineering manager for the data team at Not on the High Street. And my team basically consists of data engineers, analytics engineers, data scientists. And we are responsible for the data platform, and we make sure everyone in the business has the data that they need when they need it to make different decisions. So if you're sitting there trying to guess where my accent is from, I'm South African, and I moved to London in September 2022. And essentially, I started my career as a telecoms engineer, but after 10 years, decided I absolutely hated it. And then I took some time off to study data science. And since then, I've worked in various data-related roles, and I kind of see myself as more of a data generalist with a particular love for data and analytics engineering. I love DBT. I hate Redshift. And I also have two 11-year-old sausage dogs who I brought with me to London. So for those of you who haven't come across Not on the High Street before, we're an online marketplace that supports different artisans, designers, and curators across the UK. We have over 5,500 small business partners selling over 370,000 products on our website. And Knott's recently turned 18 years old this year, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. So if you're looking for a gift for a loved one or maybe something special to treat yourself with, it's worth having a look at our website. So 18 years, that's quite an old company, right? Surely we've got this data stuff figured out. And the answer to that is yes and no. So the company has gone through many changes over the years, from having data sit on a PC under someone's desk to having Redshift and Tableau, and now a more modern data stack involving Snowflake, dbt, and Looker. We've had many iterations of data over time. And I joined the company 2 years ago after a number of key data leaders had left, and they didn't really leave much in terms of documentation, other than some vague ideas that they thought should be focused on over the next coming weeks. The data team was split into two, with one team focusing on insights and analytics, and then my team, which is the one that focuses on the data platform. So here I was new in the company, new in the country, and also new to this type of management role. trying to figure out how I was going to lead my team and frantically searching for a data strategy that didn't exist. I was pretty lost, to be honest. And as any good millennial will do, I headed to my bestie Google to see what she had to say on the matter. And searching for what is a data strategy kind of yielded some results like this one from Amazon. It was okay. I agree. That's what a data strategy is. But what does it look like? I really work best with examples. And I couldn't really find any. There was no neatly packaged answer. There wasn't a 5-step plan to the ideal data strategy for an 18-year-old marketplace focused on small businesses in the UK with 2 BI tools and a lot of unanswered questions. So I did a lot of research, from Slack conversations to different articles. I watched numerous YouTube videos, but nothing was really sitting right with me. There were a lot of things about core components, different stages of data scaling, different terms like data-informed, data-led, all very nice, but all jargon-filled and really overcomplicated. The only real directive I'd been given from the business at this point was to save money. So I went back to what I know, retrospectives. My first data job was pretty amazing. So 10 years in telecoms, started a brand new career. I started at a real estate agency that was data obsessed. I mean, we had estate agents using Power BI dashboards, which I thought was fascinating. And the CEO ran the company with agile principles. And we basically had a specialist team that helped us map out different processes and do a lot of retrospectives. I basically have never used so many sticky notes in my entire life. So after a couple of months working at Knots and getting the lay of the land, I did a mini retrospective from my point of view to see if I could find areas we could focus on to improve data at the company. I looked at things that were going well, like our stable data engineering pipelines, advanced dbt usage. And then I looked at things that weren't going so well, like data only being available at lunchtime, much to our stakeholders' delight, and many duplications of tools and processes. I put together a list of ideas that weren't covered by existing initiatives that could make data work a little bit better for our users. I then identified 5 goals that I wanted the team to achieve. So the first was that business directive to reduce costs. And after getting rid of some unnecessary tooling, spending hours renegotiating contracts, seeing how we could reduce our Snowflake credit usage, because at some point we were going to run out of Snowflake credits before the end of our contract. Between myself and the team, we managed to do a lot of things that helped us to achieve this goal. And then the remaining goals had a lot of progress, but they still have a lot of things that we can action against them in the future. So I had my goals and we were working towards them, but still didn't really have anything that could explain why those were my goals, besides for the fact that I had identified some things that we could be doing better. So I reached out to my mentor to see if she had any advice, and she recommended that I assess the data maturity of the company and pointed me towards a few resources. So data maturity basically looks at 4 main areas, namely purpose, people, method, and tools. And there are a number of things under each of these that you can either be really mature with or alternatively need further work to get to a higher level of maturity. And this was kind of a different way of thinking about things. And a lot of the issues that I had identified in my retro could kind of fit under some of these headings. But still, even using this, it wasn't easy for me to show how things impact each other or highlight the areas that we should be focusing on first. And then along came Wardley Mapping. So someone shared a link to a YouTube video in a forum I'm a part of, and I basically sat through this 40-minute video with my mouth wide open. This is what I was looking for. The whole thing just appealed to me in its simplicity. and it's a way to easily break down concepts into smaller components that are all interrelated and show how mature they were. Simon Wardley became my new messiah, and I kind of feel like I've joined a cult. And I'd been thinking about this for a while, but it wasn't until I was at a dinner with a fellow data leader, Paddy, when he had explained that he had been mapping out data at his organization using a Wardley map. And he was using it to explain to the business why they had to make certain hires within the data team. And I think that was just the push I needed to get started. So I'm going to try my best to explain Wardley mapping, but if after this talk, this topic interests you, there's definitely some really useful videos on YouTube that give you more of an in-depth understanding. There's also a free ebook that you can download that Simon Wardley has created. So lots of resources available for you to have a look at. But essentially, Wardley mapping is a process that you can use to make strategic decisions based on a number of factors. Essentially, it's a way to map out a process or a product, and it allows you to identify areas of duplication or improvement that can help form your strategy. And it always starts with the user and their needs. So in my example for data at Knots, I started with a data-obsessed organization as my user, and I identified a number of needs, such as data leadership, which is more around how seriously the leadership team within the company uses data than like a head of data role. Things like data metrics, common or ubiquitous language when talking about data, data governance, data literacy, all those kind of things. And then the typical kind of things that people would expect from a data team, like descriptive and prescriptive analytics. So once you've identified a user's needs, you can then take each of these needs and identify their needs. And then you basically repeat this process until you end up with a value chain where things at the top of the chain are more visible to the user, and then things at the bottom are less visible and they care a little bit less about them. So I have a simplified example on the screen with a user who needs a cup of tea. The cup of tea needs tea and hot water. Hot water needs a kettle, and a kettle needs power. The user doesn't really care about the power. They are interested in the cup of tea. So for each of the needs I identified in the previous slide, I created value chains, and many of those needs had common needs. And we'll get into that now. Just one more thing I need to explain. So each of those components or needs in the value chain can all evolve or devolve over time. And you can see on the axis I have in my image on the screen, if you look from left to right, you can see that process of evolution. So components that are rare or constantly changing are on the left in the Genesis section, whereas components that are more commoditized and kind of available as off-the-shelf solutions are on the far right. So as different components become more commonplace or more standardized within organizations, they move from custom-made on the left to commodities that can kind of be purchased from a third party on the right. So now we've got two aspects of the various components that form part of a process. You can now plot that process or that product on a Wardley map, where top to bottom shows how visible the component is, and left to right shows how evolved that component is. Yeah, just take a moment to take that in. So all of that, I plotted what data looks like at Not on the High Street. And obviously this is my opinion, so somebody else would have a different view from their perspective. And a lot of our data platform or the technology that we use can kind of be seen on the far right as yellow dots on the map. So these are common components. Lots of companies use them. We aren't going to create our own data warehouse from scratch. We then have some of the skills and data organization and framework stuff that kind of moves from left to right and then left again as the organization evolves. People join, people leave, the direction of the company changes. So that kind of stuff is always in a state of flux. So to take an example, data metrics, it's the red dot with eyes next to it in the top left. About 5 years ago, a lot of work was done to define metrics, and there's always a few key metrics that will always be measured within the company. A lot were related to initiatives that have now been completed or were needed by specific people or teams that are no longer part of the organization. So as a result of that, and for no one looking at it for a long time, it kind of devolved towards the left of our map and now highlights that as part of our data strategy, we need to revisit our data metrics, see if they're still relevant, if the definitions still make sense, and if any changes need to be made. Similarly, with data models, there were over 1,200 data models across 2 DBT repos when I joined NOTS, some of which were based on data from third-party tools that are no longer used, but the models still exist, and therefore a lot can be done to clean up and simplify some of our data models. Our DBT repos are an interesting one. So we have 2 DBT repos, one that's run from DBT Cloud that feeds our BI tools, and another that has a custom Python implementation based on an outdated version of DBT that runs on an AWS batch container. And between these 2 DBT repos, we have a lot of replication and interdependencies, which makes it really, really difficult to maintain and improve our data models. So we could identify another project as a result of this Wardley map to basically merge our 2 DBT repos together. And this will enable us to have one way of looking at all our data models. So with a Wardley map, you can identify areas you want to focus on to evolve them or mature them if you want to tie it back to kind of the data maturity stuff I spoke about earlier. And then you can kind of end up with something that looks a bit more like this, where things have shifted a little bit more to the right as you're evolving them. So to summarize, Wardley maps can help you easily identify quick wins, duplications, and focus areas. Your roadmap can now contain initiatives which have a set of directions to move your components from left to right on your Wardley map. And you can easily justify the reasoning behind any initiatives you want your team to focus on using the map. And lastly, it can help with the assessment of data maturity within the organization. So what's next? So we are actively working on some of the initiatives that have been identified that can help evolve some of the components on our Wardley map. We're also going to start planning for future initiatives and figuring out the direction of AI and ML that not on the high street. And lastly, and hopefully something all of you are willing to help out with, is understanding what other companies are doing as part of their data strategy. So yeah, thanks for listening to me talk today. I look forward to hearing any of your questions or any advice you may have around data strategies.
Nice, that was amazing. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, please do drop any questions you have for Jessica in the chat. While that's coming up, I've got a question actually. It seems like, the first step of this is kind of to work out, like you've kind of decided the data obsessed organization is the high level goal. How did you come to that conclusion? And did you need to get, did you talk to anyone else in the organization to kind of get some high level input on this before you really dove into it?
Not necessarily. So with the Wardley map, because you need to start with the user and their needs, I just added data obsessed organization as my user because I didn't want to just put NOTS as like the user. So I want people to be data obsessed. I want them to use data in every decision that they make. I want them to always think, how are we going to measure this when they're doing an initiative? So I want the company to be data obsessed. And that's kind of it's not necessarily terms that have been used, but I think that word obsessed resonates with our executive team. So it helps having it on there.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, I've got some questions coming in now. So first off, from Emily, I think I've selected it, I think. How was this received by senior executive leadership?
Yeah, so I first took my boss, who's the VP of engineering, through it. And I think it's the first time that people have actually been able to, maybe they don't understand all the terms that I use, but understand why I want to do something. It's like plainly obvious. This is why I want to do a project to merge our DBT repos together. So this project has been on the back burner for like 3 years and just hasn't ever been focused on. And it's really important from like a technical debt perspective and from my perspective and my team's perspective, but it doesn't really move the business forward. It's not like a cool data product at the end of it. It's just kind of a lot of tech debt. So this was a really easy way for me to explain. Like there's 2 dots on a map. Anybody can understand. I only want 1 dot. So this is the project that I'm going to embark on to get 1 dot. So it's a really nice way to kind of break down things. And then they can also now see how everything is interrelated. So if you want AI and ML, we can't do that. Like everybody, oh, we need Gen AI, or we want to say we do AI at the company. Okay, that's great. We can do that at some point. But that AI and ML relies on all of these things, and all of these things are not very mature at this point in time. We need to mature them a little bit more before we can even begin to focus on AI or ML. So I think, yeah, like it's been a good way to have discussions about why we want to focus on certain initiatives within the team.
Nice, I like that. Questions are rolling through now. I think that Omar's question about presenting this to the business, I think you've kind of answered that. But Omar, let me know if you've got something more specific. A few questions about tools, software you use to do this. Yeah, anything there?
So you can use any kind of graphing tool. This one I did in Miro. I think Count has graphing tools as well. You could use Visio. So pretty much, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could use PowerPoint and just put circles and lines and things between it. So at the end of the day, it's more about what you're trying to communicate than the tool you're trying to communicate it with, I guess. You could even draw it on a piece of paper if you were so inclined. I just prefer like a tool that allows me to drag things around, because if I'm like, oh wait, no, that doesn't make sense there. Oh, that's actually not as visible to the user as I thought it was, then you put it further down on the map. So it is easier to kind of use a tool like Miro to do that.
And we will be sending around a template after this as well, both for Miro and Count. So you'll have a bit of a framework to kind of get started with that.
There we go. Taylor's on.
Question from Izzy. How did you gather all this information?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So that's why I said it's a lot from my perspective. So I sat doing a lot of this myself. When I first joined the company, there wasn't even an architecture diagram. So there's maybe 1 or 2 small architecture diagrams for very specific components in our data stack. So not really related to this, but I spent quite a lot of time going into all our different tools, all our different repos on GitHub, and kind of just getting a lay of the land of what data actually looks like in terms of like an architecture perspective. A lot of this also came from discussions I've had with people, and that's why I said at the beginning, this is kind of a very one-sided approach. Some of things are informed by other people, but if I asked somebody else within the company to do a similar thing, they would come up with a completely different map. So Wardley maps are meant to be like you can have a first step, and then it's a collaborative thing to like define, okay, do you agree with this? If not, why? Where do you think this should be? But all the kind of points and things on the map either came from discussions, from blogs I've read, from different articles, and just kind of, yeah, doing something, then thinking, oh, this value at the top needs these 5 things as well. So as you're doing that value chain analysis, you kind of build up the map over time. And each of these little components on the map could probably have its own Wardley map all by itself as well. So it can be as intense or as high level as you need it to be.
Yeah, it's a good point on iteration. We just did a session on metric trees a couple months ago. That was one of the biggest pieces of advice there as well. It's just taking the first step, put something out there, and be prepared to kind of discuss it and iterate. It's just really good advice for this kind of stuff that's really complicated, involves a lot of people. I think that's a great point. So I'm trying to keep up with all the questions. Good question here from Simi. How was it received by the people reporting to you? What's kind of the data perspective on this?
I think they liked it because it was something that they could understand. This is like, they could finally work on projects we've been talking about for months now. and be like, yes, we can finally clean up our data models because we can justify why we're doing it. I think that's been very satisfying as part of our DBT repo merge project that we've been doing. And we've been cleaning up a lot of the old logic that we've got and just simplifying things, because there's a lot of overcomplication sometimes. Like, people are really coming up with clever solutions to things, but sometimes a clever solution is not the most simple solution. And we want simplicity as part of our goals. Simplicity is really important. So I think it's been well received by my team. I've also done this presentation for the tech team as a whole at Not on the High Street. So we have, like, once a month we do like share different bits of information with the entire tech team. And this was kind of a presentation that I did. So just a different way of thinking about strategy or thinking about a process and how you can map it out, which is applicable not just to data, but many different departments can also do their own ways of like breaking things down into smaller components and kind of assessing them from a maturity perspective.
Yeah, I'd be curious, if any of those other teams adopted something like this. I can imagine it being something that's picked up after you presented on it.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything, but there were people who wanted to kind of know more about it. I guess it's always like priority. Is this something that you want to do or have time to do? Because it is something, it takes a while. So you have to carve out time to kind of put it together and like iterate on it. Like, since this has been done, I haven't actually gone back to this diagram to update it with like work that we've done, which is, I mean, something that I probably should be doing, just kind of as we are evolving over time, as projects progress, this kind of whole landscape changes. So we need to continuously go back and look at it.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess all the software underneath is evolving at the same time as well. Lots to keep up with. Yeah, question here about kind of using this. Oh, so I keep forgetting to press this button. Did you use this in conjunction with company goals or OKRs, or maybe did you think about how to integrate that with this at all?
So not necessarily company goals, but at the moment it's mainly the tech strategy. So trying to, because we're a data platform and not like data as a whole, it's trying to align our strategy with the tech strategy as well. And a lot of our goals overlap with the tech strategy, which is quite nice, because I'd done my goals before our new VP of engineering had introduced the goals that he wanted the strategy for the tech side of the business. And simplifying is like one of the main goals that we've got, to try and simplify our tech, simplify our data, because we don't need to be so overly complicated, because that slows us down essentially. So a lot of these things will help enable the business to achieve some of the goals that they've set out. So the business needs different data. I mean, the data metrics kind of measure the success of the business. And as part of that data metrics project, we've started working on metric trees, which is a whole different way of looking at metrics, which we have to start getting the business used to. So that's also now an iterative process. We've got one small little metric tree that we're now going to start adding to, and everybody we show it to is really excited, because now it's starting to simplify things. So kind of allows us to develop data products that are now useful for the business, because we've had time to focus on it, because we've made it a priority. This is so far on the left of the graph, data metrics. We really need to improve it and get it more to the right. So how do we do that so it's a beneficial thing for the business?
Nice, that makes sense. Yeah, I think a really kind of almost easy to forget part of your presentation was those objectives at the top, where you kind of had simplicity, and some of those other ones. I think Wardley maps are so broad, it's easy to look at them from a lot of different lenses, and you can kind of see, things that you want to see, or things, but having those kind of goals to start with, I think helps you read it a certain way, which is nice. All right, another question here from Simi. How long did it take you to get up to speed after joining the company before making any changes and decisions?
That's a tough one. I feel like I'm still learning things every day, and I've been there 2 years. I would say for me to feel really comfortable with things was probably about 6 months. So the first couple of months were spent observing and like helping out with things where required. There were still projects that people were busy with based on people who had left. So it was, I would say, probably like 4 to 6 months before I could come in and like make improvements to processes or like even identify areas where we were having issues. But yeah, every day I still learn something new, and that's always great, I guess. But yeah.
And a question more kind of technically on the Wardley map itself, the visible versus invisible, is that specifically from the perspective of the user?
Yeah. So when we look, like if we started at the top, so the user is basically only caring about these things. They like, these are the things that are visible to them. And then as you kind of move down that map, it's kind of less, I care about them. So if I had to do this graph from my perspective, like it would probably be a little bit more reversed, because I care about the technology, I care about the platform, and less so about the things that are built. I mean, I'm not too worried about a graph that an analyst builds on something unless they tell me that it's wrong. But from my perspective, like if our AWS batch container that imports data from a specific third-party tool doesn't work for a few days, like that I care about. So it's all relative to the user that you've put at the top of your graph. So in this instance, that's our data obsessed organization. So all our users who use the data, as opposed to like me who cares about the technology around the data.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, next from AO. Did you get any pushback from stakeholders? Did you have any kind of leverage? Sorry, did you have to leverage kind of your VP or anything? Or did you have like a green light to do this kind of work thing?
Yeah, so that was one of the benefits. So I had been tasked by our VP to put together a data strategy. So from a board perspective, they're very interested in getting data into a more advanced level within Not on the High Street. So we have both the board's kind of blessing to work on data projects, as well as the VP of engineering wanted like a good focus on data strategy. And I think because some of these address like the initiatives that we want to work on to kind of shift things a little bit more to the right, are going to help with some pain points within the company. So like common language, like conversion rates. You ask anybody, they'll all have different versions of what conversion rate means to them. So it's about kind of, these are problems that keep coming up and keep coming up. And it's about, here are our plans to address these problems and kind of come up with solutions that everybody's on board with. So this is just like our data strategy. We obviously enablers for the business with a number of initiatives that they work on. So that work kind of happens alongside this. So obviously we will do a little bit of work on the data strategy, but if all of a sudden there's a new marketing initiative that needs a lot of focus, then because we work in an agile way, we're able to shift and assist with that. And then we kind of always have these projects that we can work on in the background that we can dedicate, for example, like 60 to 70% of our sprint to, and the other 30% to the more the other projects that aren't being driven from ourselves, because we're sometimes a service team and we have people who need things from us.
Question from Izzy. Did you find that data literacy and behavior actually moved across the map after completing more tech-focused initiative, or does that need its own project?
I think it depends. Our data literacy, you can see it's kind of sitting in the middle there. Our users are quite data literate, I would say, from my opinion. Like they can use Looker by themselves. We have a lot of Looker training that people can have when they first join the company. So to answer their basic business questions, we don't really have to get involved so much with that anymore. So I think data literacy is quite high. And obviously a lot of these initiatives like defining common language and defining our data metrics and simplifying how we visualize those metrics will go a long way to improve data literacy. So from my perspective, one of my goals was embed, and embed in this context means I want data to be embedded in every decision that somebody makes when they're working at Knots. So like from like, do they have the data they need to, like, for example, marketing, can they decide what campaign needs more budget put against it? or customer service, can they decide which areas they need to put more help articles for, because people are struggling with this and they're getting a lot of calls about that. So it's kind of making data a part of people's lives, so they don't even realize that their data are like obsessed. It's just like, this is part of my job. I log on, I get the data to do this, and then I do this. And when I'm working on a specific initiative, I measure it in this way, and that requires data in some way, shape, or form to see if that initiative is a success. So yeah, I think if you have a problem with data literacy, you can have separate projects to focus on that, because you can, like any dot on this map could have a separate initiative behind it to shift it more to a more mature state. So yeah, I guess it just depends on the company. But it's a good way to focus. So if your little data literacy dot is sitting very far on the left, you can now explain to people why you want different training or different documents or whatever you want to put together to help shift data literacy within the organization.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point. I think kind of looking at the map, there's a lot of technical dependencies, but like processes feels a bit, I get why they're kind of not on there, but they're kind of like this unspoken part of the puzzle. So it's almost like, if you think about the circle of data literacy or this point, yes, that is dependent on certain tools and technologies that you have in yellow and stuff. But it is also, yeah, how do you speak to people? What's that process like? What is the training like? All these other things that maybe are kind of behind that dot. So it's helpful to think about it, I guess, in terms of like, okay, if we want to move this dot to the right, yes, here are some technical dependencies, but here's also everything else that goes into it. All right, and question from Reagan here. How have you expanded on the Wardley map into a fully fledged data strategy document with tooling, etc.? And how did you transition this into a roadmap?
So I don't have like a, here is my 10-page data strategy. I've got these slides, well, some of these slides kind of combined with a few summaries of the initiatives that we want to work on. So I can kind of show you an example of what that looks like. So yeah, one of our kind of tooling things was around ending our contract with Tableau. So this kind of ties our goals with our strategy. So every time there's a goal, kind of highlighting what goal that works towards and a little bit more about that initiative that we're working on. Merging our DBT repos, explaining why we want to do it. There's loads of other documentation places we have for specific initiatives and the way we need to document them. But like, this is just kind of an overview for our SLT team to kind of understand why we want to focus on certain things. So this is why we want to do it, who's impacted, what the goals are that it's kind of working towards. And yeah, then it can be backed up with that Wardley map, so we can kind of show you on the map. So it's more of a discussion point rather than like here is a huge document, but kind of these were the documented things. If you have a huge document, no one's going to read it. So I prefer to present things and have something for somebody to go back and reference, something short, snappy that they can go back and look at.
Yeah, good advice. I've got one last question, if that's okay. I know you mentioned that there are some things you looked at this that you had anticipated seeing, like the DBT core cloud instance, maybe even Tableau. But was there anything that was really surprising to you?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I don't think it's surprising because I've created this. So if maybe somebody else had created it, it would have been a little bit more surprising. I mean, this could be wrong or wrong from somebody else's perspective, because I guess this is my opinion of what things are. I think the nice thing about this is it's been able to highlight gaps in knowledge rather than skill sets. So you can see we've got like data analysis and data science quite far to the left. And that's not like dig at anybody's data science or data analyst or our data analysts and their skill sets. It's more around, we only have one data scientist. We have a very small data analyst team. So it's more around, we don't have enough people to serve the needs of the company in terms of data science needs or data analysis needs, just because it's a body problem. We don't have enough people or enough hours in the day to kind of service all those kind of things. So if those were to improve, we either have to upskill other people around the company with the skills to analyze data, or we need to hire more people to kind of help with that. So yeah, I guess it's kind of just making sure it's not, this isn't like reflective of anybody's skill set. It's more around like the skills which exist within the company. There may not be enough of things, which I guess is like an interesting way to look at things.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I think we've answered all the questions. I think maybe, do you want to leave us with maybe one last piece of advice you'd give anyone who's about to start using Wardley Maps for their data strategy?
I think don't overthink it. Just throw it together. It's nothing's permanent. You can change your mind next week if you don't like it, or if you've had a conversation with someone that changes your opinion about how things are, or you work on an initiative that kind of shifts something. It's a living, breathing thing, so it can change at any time, and it can change based on conversations. It's just, I think it's a really nice way to kind of get all your thoughts out on a map and kind of, or like in one place. Here is kind of everything that I've been thinking about for the past couple of months. Let me just put it all down, and I can shift things around, and then I'm going to speak to someone and then move things around a little bit more. Yeah, it's just get started. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it. I mean, if you look at body map examples from around, like everybody has a different perspective. That's the thing. It's a completely unique to you or your situation or your team kind of thing. So I think it's just a positive thing to have any kind of discussion around data and how we can improve it within different organizations. And if this is a tool to facilitate those discussions, that's always great.
Well, I think that's a great point to end on. Jessica, thank you so much for doing this and sharing this. Everyone, thank you for joining. Thanks for your great questions. I'll send around the recording to this and a few other bits of materials to help if you want to get started on this process yourself. And yeah, I'll send around the metric tree information as was requested, and yeah, anything else I think coming up that might be useful. All right, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks all.